Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. I've always been fascinated with the process of anything artistic, how they record music, how they make movies, TV shows, even the writing of books. And we're going to look at that today, the whole process. And dare I say that pretty much anybody can be a writer if you have a passion, if you have a story, if you have a direction. Well, let me change that up. Anybody with his help can be a writer. Mark Pogodzinski joins us. He's got a great publishing company, NFB Publishing, and one of his writers, one of his authors joins us today. Hey, Mark, how you doing? And who do we have with us?
We have Michelle Harper, who's a mystery writer, who most recent book, Poker Cemetery, an excellent mystery, very clever, very witty, a quick read that people seem to enjoy and will enjoy. Because it gives you a little something different than your average mystery. There's a lot more to it, and I think it's the big thing is wit, which a lot of mysteries seem to be missing. They're like heavy-handed, a little sledgehammer-esque in their plot devices. This one a little bit more subtle and a lot more clever.
Hey, Michelle, a little bit different. There aren't as many female suspense writers out there as there are males. So it's kind of refreshing. And your book is very different in that it's got a little sarcastic twist to it. It's got a fun side, but a suspense side. This is your second book. What inspired you even to start writing in the first place?
Oh, what inspired me? I wrote a few things when I used to live in Los Angeles. I was there for about 15 years, and I worked for some of the movie companies. I worked for Paramount Pictures, and I worked for Spelling Entertainment and another smaller game show company. And I wrote a couple of things way back when, but it didn't dawn on me that I was that interested in writing. So this came about really later in life for me.
What's unique about it is it's involving a cemetery. There have been other books involving cemeteries. There's a lot of focus on the headstones in the cemetery. Tell us about that.
Well, the story came about during COVID, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. So I have an electric bike. So I was on my bike almost every night after work. And I was living in Hamburg Village at the time, and I rode up through this small cemetery on a hill. I think it was Pierce Avenue. And I was looking around at the headstones, and I just thought, they're really interesting. I mean, I really like cemeteries. They're interesting. I always have a curiosity about the people and how old they were when they passed. And I just thought to myself, what if there was a cemetery filled with, jokes, riddles, insults, and things like that in the whole cemetery? And so then I came home and I wrote a page and a half and just started to expand on it from there.
Wow. I'm fascinated by headstones because it tells a story, family relationship, a start, an end. Sometimes it goes a little bit deeper. There might be an inscription, a little more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I just find it fascinating. And Forest Lawn is another one that is just such a beautiful place. Interesting.
Where's the suspense part without giving up the book? Where does the twist, the scary, the part where we're like, whoa.
Well, I think the kicker in the whole story is that some of the folks buried in the cemetery aren't actually dead. So there's an insurance fraud situation going on, and that is uncovered about midway through the book.
Wow. Pause that book for a sec. Your first one. What's that book called? What's it about?
That one is called The Boxcar Killer. And that book was actually, the idea for that was actually in my head for about 10 years before I put that down on paper. And that book is about taggers that tag on the boxcars. And there's two young men, and they're both. One of them is going to be a lawyer. The other one is kind of more of a street kid, but he's very, very artistic. And the lawyer is actually interested in art, and he goes to the train tracks and looks at all of the art all the time. And what happens is he identifies this kid's artwork, and later on in the book, the kid ends up getting arrested for a murder he didn't commit, and the lawyer kid ends up defending him. And they don't know each other until he doesn't find that out till towards the end.
Wow. I'm fascinated with the way people come up with plots and how it all gets pieced together. Got to ask the inspiration. That's brilliant. What's the inspiration on that one?
Oh, that one was I just came back to Buffalo. I had been out, like I said, in LA for a long time, and I came back and I was stopped at a railroad crossing in Clarence, and the train was it must have been almost 15 minutes long. And I really do like the tagging. It's really that picture right there. Were they from the Bronx? Where were they from? And so then I started to just get this whole story idea just sitting there in my car, waiting for it to pass.
Wow. Based on the premise of that book, I feel the need to ask this question. The way the kid, the lawyer were put together, do you believe that things happen for a reason?
I don't know. That's hard to answer. I'd like to think so, but I can't. I really can't say.
We'll never have proof. However, interesting how they were put together in that book. Yeah, in an odd way, and the lawyer wound up helping the kid.
Yeah.
Was there a reverse of that in terms of the art?
Was there a reverse in that?
Yeah, how the kid inspired the lawyer through his art.
Yeah, because later on in the book, the kid gets set free. He's exonerated. And the two of them start hanging out a little bit. And the artist, the tagger, gets the lawyer involved in doing some art projects. So he kind of gives him that freedom to be what he sort of always wanted to be. And his father pushed him into being a lawyer, but he now has the freedom to just be.
To be creative.
Yes.
Did you ever think you could write a book?
No, not really. It's one part creative and it's one part discipline. You really can't have one without the other.
How do you find the discipline? And we always hear that term, writer's block. How do you stay on track?
Yeah.
And what's your process? Coming up with ideas? Are you always thinking? Always have a pen, piece of paper, phone ready in case an idea pops in your head?
Yeah. I'll put some notes in my iPhone at times, or I'll jot things down. I think the key is to write every day. Sometimes when you sit down to do it, you have nothing. Like I'm like, oh, I got nothing. And you'll be surprised at what comes up. And when you keep that book in your subconscious every day, it's working in the background. And sometimes, like I said, you sit down and all of a sudden some of your best, in my opinion, some of your best stuff comes out when you least expect it.
Interesting. Is it like a habit where if you keep at it, it will continue to flow, as opposed to I'm gonna have a dry day. I'll wait till tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes. Yeah, wait another day. Yeah, I've got nothing here today. If you have the intent of writing and just sit in front of whatever way you write, whether it's pen, paper, whatever, keyboard, that eventually it's almost like you prime the engine. You're used to it.
Yeah. You can come up with new stuff, or you can get another page down. I listen to a lot of John Grisham kind of best practices. And that's one of the things that he said is he's one of my favorite writers. And he just said, write at the same time in the same place every day. And, I tried to do that with both of the books that I wrote. So, it comes to you. You just have to keep pushing it forward. And sometimes, maybe you do sit down and you don't have a whole lot. So then maybe you go back to the page before and you soup that up a little better, or make it more interesting. And, every line has to be interesting. Every single sentence has to be interesting. It has to push the reader forward. there's too much distraction for them to go elsewhere. So you really have to make sure every line is superb.
You sound like a perfectionist. Would you say that's you?
Well, like I said, really, there is a lot of distraction for people, and people don't even read anymore. They skim. I'm guilty of that for articles and that. So if it's boring or not interesting, they're gone.
Do you feel like you have a responsibility to the reader?
Absolutely. I think if someone buys your product and they took the time to buy it, and there's an expectation, and I think for me writing books, I always want my next one to be better than the one before it. So you owe it to your reader.
It's like inviting somebody over for a party, or just, somebody coming over where you make sure the house is clean. You got food out, a spread for them because you appreciate that they're coming over. Mark, when you first saw the concept for her second book, Poker Cemetery, what did you think?
I think I'm very similar to Michelle, and maybe not the norm, but like I like cemeteries myself. She mentioned Forest Lawn, which is the very large cemetery here in Buffalo. And one of my favorite stones in that cemetery was it's engraved. I was wrong about certain things, but not many. And that's what the person had on their gravestone.
Wow.
And I think it was, when I first saw it, I laughed out loud. And I always thought that was interesting. I made a note of where it is so I could always find it. But like she says, every stone has a story. And even the first book, the Tigers, they have a story. And I think it takes a certain special creativity to go deeper into that concept. The names, the dates. And then I like the fact that it was a scam. Like all these clever things in the cemetery, it was basically an insurance scam, which I thought was, again, something different, something clever, something witty that you're not expecting, instead of like a straight murder mystery or something like that. So that's what I liked about it. I thought, again, the cleverness, the wit, and now that she said it, every line, that book, it goes, and you're locked in, and you're reading, and by the time you realize a couple hours have passed, you're done with that book.
Yeah, I never realized it or thought of it this way, but there's a lot of life in a cemetery. When you start, taking time to just, walk, reflect, think about those headstones, what their lives were like, what their families were like, what they brought to life. I know a lot of research goes into many books. Was there research in Poker Cemetery for you, Michelle?
The research, really. I just wanted to make sure I had my dates right, and I had my, I's were dotted and T's were crossed. But no, there wasn't necessary to do a lot of research for that.
The whole concept, obviously inspired by a cemetery, but how did that come to you with the insurance scam, the murder situation that ensued? Like, how did those pieces come together? Was it like a flash of, I could do this, I could do that, let me do it? Or did it kind of piece together as you were writing the book?
Well, I mean, I think it started with the cemetery and the interesting headstones. And then I kind of thought, it needed some darkness. So I thought, let's put something in there that's going to be, that was humorous. That's humorous and lighthearted, but let's put something dark in there. And so it kind of just was building from there. And then I thought about my main character, and, that he's, his lineage is, he's a poker. His name is Jack Poker. So he's the great, 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 great grandson of the first person buried in the cemetery. So I thought about him, and he comes back from college, and all of this, he starts to uncover all of this mystery that's going on in there. So it starts with an idea, and you just keep building, and you should know how it's going to end pretty much generally. Then, when you start it, you should know the ending.
That being said, what's your writing process for each chapter? Did you move forward? I'm going to write this now. I feel like writing, way into it and then kind of work your way back.
Well, like I said, it starts with an idea, and you kind of get that first, you kind of lay the groundwork at the beginning, but you can't do too much of that because it can't be boring. It's got to just keep moving forward. And, I'll know the beginning and the general premise of how I want the book to go. And I'll know the ending, and I'll know some of the stuff in the middle. And I'll maybe jot down a few lines for each chapter. You want about 40 chapters. And, sometimes you can stick to that, and then other times you can't because you get ideas along the way. You don't get everything all at once. So you have to sort of be flexible in the middle, I would say.
Is there any of you in this book in terms of the characters, even if it's a male character, just personality, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why, but my main characters have been young men. But I guess I can relate to them I have a lot of empathy for my characters, in particular the protagonist. And that's what fuels you. If I always say, like, if you can get to the pain, then the words will come. And, with Des Campbell in The Boxcar Killer, he's really pushed by his father. And he grows up in the 60s, and there's a lot of turmoil going on there. And there's a lot of, unrest. And so he's born into a prominent family, and they really want him to follow in his father's footsteps. So he's kind of stifled. And then with Jack Poker, he is raised by a single mother, and he grows up with a lot of shame. The Pokers are generally hoodlums. They've hoodlums from way back when. And, his father left him and his mother. So he's carrying around that shame. Once you know your character, you know how they're going to react in any given situation. You should know. You should know their pain points, what stirs them, what causes them angst, and what they want.
I want to go a little deep now into the character development. Did you write down the character? Just define it in front of you. Just go drill it down, maybe 10 points. What makes up Jack Poker? Here we go. Did you define that ahead of time so you had a feel for what the characters are? So you always had a baseline to go back to?
Yes. I that's really important to do that, because you'll know what motivates them, and you'll know what causes them anxiety. And that's really a basis. That's a basis for your story, who they are, what they want.
So boxcar killers. Why a boxcar? Why the 60s? How did that all, you were at a train, you saw a train, and that inspired you for that. But why the 60s? There were people that were living on boxcars back then.
I like to do stories that don't involve cell phones.
Okay. All right. So we're pre 95, somewhere in 99.
Yeah.
Are you okay with beepers and pagers though? Just get it.
No, I don't like those either.
All right. So now we're going to bounce it back. Oh, we're 80s and 89 and back. Okay, great.
The 60s, I guess, because it takes place in the South, and there was a lot of bigotry in the South. And also it was at a time, I think, where, teenagers and young people were starting to break out of the mold, so to speak. And there was that friction with parents and that friction with society. And also, for your minorities, they were, endured a lot of suffering. So it just gave it more conflict.
Mark, for you taking on Poker Cemetery, what are some of the things that you had to do in terms of getting it done, editing, all of that?
Well, you can tell from the interview that Michelle is professional. So there was no editing much for me to do. What I do is I try to craft the book to the best of my ability to meet the wants and needs of the author. And I think you can tell from the interview, like, even though inspired by a cemetery or a boxcar, there's incredible skill and determination to produce these books. And my job is to make sure that I honor that when I create the book and give the author something that they can be proud of and that they can market. Because again, the character creation alone, that brief discussion, the amount of effort that goes into that is astronomical. To know a fictional character as well as you would know a real person, to know who they are. As she says, the pain points, which I think is a great term. There's a famous quote by Kurt Vonnegut: "You want to create a character and do unspeakable things to them for the joy of your audience." And I think that's what she does. And so my job is to honor that. And again, the editing was minimal to almost nothing.
When you write, Michelle, does it feel like anything's possible?
It is possible. Anything is possible. It's your baby. You can take that story wherever you want it to go. And it's fun. It's a challenge. And you're challenging yourself, but it's a labor of love, I guess.
I had I think in music a lot, and this song popped in my head referring to the book about the box. This because I wonder if there was an inspiration. You ever hear the song Rainy Night in Georgia?
Yeah.
That's what I think of. I think of, it's about a boxcar. It's a man with, loneliness and desperation, missing someone, a loved one. And you said the South, and that's Georgia. So that kind of flashed to my head. And I don't know. I don't know if that was an inspiration for that book.
There's one song that I reference in the book, The Stones, Paint It Black. They're at a museum, and that song just popped out. But you try to pick a song that's popular, obviously, at the time of the time period of the book.
Okay, well, all right. My point, because Rainy Night in Georgia came out in 1970. Paint It Black was probably like mid 60s. I want to say 66 or 67.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. The stuff you learn. I find this fascinating, like getting into the head of somebody that creates art, and writing a book is art, and learning about the whole process behind it. And what's your next book? What's the premise? What's the topic? Is it on your radar?
There's a couple of them that I'm kicking around. I haven't committed to one yet, but there's one called, the working title is called Elevator 9. And that's more of a psychological horror, not the gory kind of horror. It's not my thing, but it's about, the premise is about a single mother who is forced to be employed at this collection agency that's in this dilapidated office building, and it takes place in the Bronx. And these collection agency folks are just really unscrupulous how they go about collecting money from like essentially poor people. So anyway, some of those folks disappear into Elevator 9. So that's one. And then another story.
Okay, I got to ask you, like a real elevator?
Yes, a real elevator. Because I've spent a lot of times in office buildings, and sometimes when you're in these office buildings and you're by yourself, they can be pretty creepy.
I hear you, especially when there's vacant offices. I was in recently a building, and it's like, all you're doing is you walk in. It's like, check everything. But it just popped in my head, and there's a book just about being in an elevator, like crazy, but look at Mark Wahlberg and his latest movie, Flight Risk. And it's about being in a plane, a small plane, transporting not a prisoner, but somebody who's going to testify. And the federal marshal, it's 3 people on the plane. The whole movie is on that small Cessna. That's it. I was like, they made a whole movie about that. And there's scuffles that ensue and all of that. But, maybe in an elevator. You never know.
Yeah. Interesting.
Elevator 9, final question. 9th floor. What's a 9?
What's the 9?
Did you say elevator 9?
I did.
Yeah. Where's the 9 come in?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
That's a better answer than anyone you could come up with. There is no reason.
Yeah.
That's actually cool. Wow. It's fascinating how this all works. And certainly it's my belief that you can't walk this journey alone. And Mark is there to support you in every way. NFBpublishing.com is the website. Learned a lot today with both of you on here. Mark and Michelle, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.